right? Nagode. Nagode. Okay. Okay. So Eve is a local award-winning artist with a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Photography from Rhode Island School of Design. After the Royal Gorge fire in 2013, Eve asked permission to document the rebuilding and restoration of the Royal Gorge Bridge and Park. These photos were published in the book Royal Gorge Photography by Eve, and includes rare night sky photos of the park before power was restored. Since then, Eve has continued to take Royal Gorge photos for billboards, magazines, websites, and other promotional items. She is working on her next book, which I think you have back there, right, Eve? Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, okay. After the fire, revisiting the Royal Gorge Bridge and Park, which includes the history of the Royal Gorge. And you can see more examples of her work on foxrunart.com. Please welcome Eve Nagode.
Oh, we'll stay on. Testing 1, 2, 3. Can you hear me okay? The audio okay? Okay. Well, hello, my name is Eve Nagode. I'm here today thanks to my niece, Wendy Schifferl. Her mother is my sister. Here's a little bit about my background. You've already heard a very excellent introduction. I will go through this very quickly. I earned my Bachelor of Photography, my BFA in Photography at Rhode Island School of Design. I moved to Canyon City in 2010. I started taking photos at the Royal Gorge Park in 2014 after the Royal Gorge fire while the park was being restored. I published a book of photos in 2015. That is this book right here. Strange, okay. This book right here, and I do have them for sale in the back. They are $20 each, including tax. I created the historical video that was shown at the Plaza Theater at the Royal Gorge Bridge and Park from 2015 to 2022. I also created a historical timeline, which is on display at the Visitor Center at the park. And I took all the photos on display at the Visitor Center gallery. So you can say that this is my longest running solo photo show. I'm currently working on a new book called After the Fire, Rebuilding the Royal Gorge Bridge and Park. And it's also going to have Royal Gorge history, fun facts, and rare photos. And what you're going to see today is from the chapter about the Woodstave water pipeline. You can also see my photos on billboards around the Royal Gorge area. There we go. And also on souvenirs, magazine covers. And I even found a brochure in the hallway that had full of my photos. I'm everywhere. Okay. So how many of you have visited the Royal Gorge area via car, helicopter, raft, or train? Okay. How many have been there since the fire in 2013? Okay, that looks good. Well, I don't have to tell you where it is then. So many visitors to the park look across the Arkansas River and ask, what is that on the other side? That is the Woodstave water pipeline, completed on October 8, 1909, and shut down on November 30th, 1974. A remarkable 65 years. With the Arkansas River running right through the middle of Canyon City, why would anyone build a water pipeline where towering rock walls would make maintenance difficult? In this 1886 map, the Canyon City Waterworks was located near Main Street, which is now US Highway 50, and a county road, which is now First Street. Water flowed from the river via a ditch that was 9 feet wide on the top and 6 feet wide on the bottom. Water percolated from the ditch through the ground into collection basins. Next to that was a backup reservoir. The basins were connected to the pump house by underground masonry pipes. An 8-inch main line of iron went from the pump house to Canyon City. These prisoners built the waterworks system in 1880. Prison authorities felt that public works projects provided meaningful work to convicts since the prison contained no workshops or other means of getting out of solitary cells. The revenue from the projects reduced the cost of running the prison. Shawshank movie, anyone? Anyway. Okay, the pump house had 3-foot thick brick walls around the outside. Inside, there were 3 levels with a 7-foot pit for steam engine flywheels. The building design allowed rain to drain into the building. I mean, if you're a waterworks place, you got fresh rain, might as well make the most of it. So it all drained right into the building with everything else. Inside the pump house were 2 coreless type steam engines that pumped water into the city main line. They were each 5,000 horsepower and weighed a total of 30 tons. Considered state-of-the-art in the late 1800s, they were relatively high efficiency and low maintenance. This picture here is of the coreless steam engine at the Science Museum in London, UK. I put it out here so you could see the size of the flywheel compared to the size of the people standing around it. These things were monsters. And that's probably why the walls of the pump house were 3 foot thick. So water everywhere with the Arkansas River, however, not a drop to drink. Water was untreated and unfiltered. The silt flowed into residential homes where the Arkansas River became muddy from rain runoff. At times, not even a cloth tied around the faucet could filter out the dirt. But the most vexing problem was pollution from mining operations upstream. The Arkansas River was so tainted by the use of chemicals, deposit of placer, tailings, and debris that fish could not live in it. Up until now, we've talked about water for city use. Additional ditches redirected water on the north and the south sides of the Arkansas River for agricultural irrigation. In 1888, the Canyon City Board of Commissioners proposed that large, worthless tracts of land on each side of the Arkansas River would become valuable for agricultural purposes by building large irrigation ditches using prison labor. They proposed to pay for it by selling the water rights. The project was called State Canal Number 1. The head gate would be 4 miles west of Canyon City in the Royal Gorge. The ditch would proceed east to a point about 19 miles north of Pueblo. Note that although this map shows the canal as a straight line, the actual canal would be much longer as it meandered across the terrain. In 1891, work started in the Royal Gorge. Over 100 prisoners worked each day. By the end of 1892, only 1.9 miles of ditch and 270 feet of tunnel excavation were completed. The project was abandoned in 1907. A survey revealed that private companies held all of the water supply. Oops. A new water source would entail costly reservoirs, and the estimated cost to complete was $1.3 million. What remained was an unusable canal at the mouth of the Arkansas River, with tunnels wide enough for 2 vehicles to pass and incredible views. So Canyon City, here we go. Canyon City decided to use convict labor to build a road over the canal to attract tourists. In 1908, they opened up the Royal Gorge Scenic Driveway, known as Tunnel Drive today. At the turn of the century, Canyon City started looking at water supply alternatives. The great Colorado invention called the wooden stave pipe was considered. Iron bands bound special cut staves of redwood or Oregon cedar. The pipe could be buried or run along the surface. The advantages pitched were cheaper than any other pressure pipe of equal durability. The probable life is far greater than sheet iron, wrought iron, or steel pipe. Greater carrying capacity that in either cast iron or riveted pipe. Always clean and sweet. No caulking to decay. Never bursts. Keep in mind, it said never bursts. It's important. Easily repaired, also important. It can be built anywhere of any size over the most mountainous and inaccessible country, where transportation of iron pipes would be next to impossible. If boulders fell on the pipeline, the wood would be easier to repair than metal. The entire water supply at the time of Denver traveled through 60 miles of wooden pipelines, 12 to 48 inches in diameter. Wow, what a product. Okay, so the Cottonwood Creek proposal was to draw fresh alpine snow water from the Sangre de Crystal Mountains in southwest Fremont County, since the Arkansas River was still polluted. Where Cottonwood Creek drained into the Arkansas River, a 30-mile, 6-inch diameter pipeline would carry the water along the Arkansas River and through the Royal Gorge. This aerial photograph shows the size of the creek compared to the Arkansas River. You can just barely see that little blue thread going right down from the top. Volume-wise, it was not a good long-term solution. Meanwhile, in 1906, a grassroots effort to end the mining pollution in the Arkansas River grew until the cities of Salida, Canyon City, and Pueblo brought lawsuits against the Twin Lakes placers in Granite, Colorado. Canyon City became optimistic that the Arkansas River would eventually be clean. In 1907, Canyon City held a special election authorizing the city council to issue bonds for a new $400,000 water system. No pumps were necessary since the water would flow naturally towards Canyon City due to the elevation drop in the Royal Gorge. The pipeline inlet or headgate would be 9 miles west of Canyon City. From there, the water would flow into settling ponds to remove dirt and sand. The pipeline would cross the river at Gorge Station to connect with the existing canal from the abandoned state project. A series of settling and filter ponds in Canyon City would clean the water. That brings us to the mystery of the Royal Gorge. So a concrete structure sits high above the pipeline in a remote location inaccessible from above. No one I interviewed knew what it was. People who worked on the pipeline in the 1960s and 70s said it wasn't part of the pipeline. So we'll get back to that in a minute. A mystery. So on May 21st, 1908, Canyon City awarded contracts to two companies from Grand Junction and Pueblo. The pipeline was expected to take about 13 months to complete. 2 months later, all work on the first mile of construction upstream stopped. The Denver and Rio Grande Railroad was considering a second track on the south side of the Arkansas River and wanted to survey the upper part of the gorge. 85 construction workers were laid off. 6 weeks later, the railroad and the city settled the right-of-way. Part of the pipeline was rerouted. The contractors got a 30-day extension for the deadline. This is where my friend Larry Green comes into play, my partner in crime in all things historical. He sent me this map and said, I think there's an interesting detail you might like about the pipeline on the map. So I'm going to show you a blown up section on the left in which what you're looking north is south. So you have on the lower part of this wiggly line, the red is the existing track. The yellow is the proposed second main track. And then the Canyon City pipeline is the green line. Basically, the Canyon City pipeline was to run between the track and the Arkansas River. So if it leaked, it would leak into the river and not onto the track. However, in this one location, which is where you see that tunnel on the map, the railroad decided it would rather do a 1,200-foot bore tunnel through the rock than to do that sharp curve and follow the river. And it did not want a water pipeline sharing the tunnel with it. So the pipeline would have to be rerouted over the tunnel. And fortunately, there was enough upstream elevation from where the water came into the pipeline to keep the pressure in the pipeline to go uphill. So the picture on the right, what you see is the straight line across is the proposed railroad tunnel and the entrance is right where the X is. It was going to bore into the ground, and they didn't want the pipeline going there. So they instead agreed to have the pipeline go uphill coming in from the right to the pressure release system and then come back down on the left and then go back to where it was supposed to be between the tracks and the water. It's easier to see the two pipeline paths here. The Arkansas River and the pipeline water flow is going from right to left. And you'll see where the arrow points to the original path for the pipeline, and then the other arrow in the middle showing the rerouted path where it has to be higher up. And there in the circle on the right is the air vent. And that is what, I'm going to go back to the previous one. The reference is air vent in pipeline. So thanks to Larry, I had my answer, is that this shows that they needed to have the pipeline moved up. And what happened is the railroad said, just kidding, we're not going to build a track. And as soon as they found out there was no track, then they moved the pipeline back down to the lower elevation because it was more efficient. And as years went by, no one remembered what that air vent was there for. So now you are a member of a tiny group of people who know what this thing is. And if you ever take the train and you're going along, you can point to it and say, I know what that thing up there on the hillside is. And there it is. It is a hinge flap on the right with pipeline entering on the right. There's an air vent, and then there's a pipeline exit on the left. So convict labor was subcontracted on both ends of the construction. On the east end, the water pipeline would go through Canal Number 1 tunnels to the reservoir filtration and settling basins. Convicts would create a tunnel under Skyline Drive to exchange for water rights for the prison. On the west end, Construction expert Everett McKinnon guarded and directed convicts working on the dam, headgate, pipeline, and settling basin. It was hard work for the convicts. At the west end of the gorge are the remains of graffiti left by one of the convicts. I've enhanced it to show what hundreds of thousands of railroad passengers saw. The quote, "The way of a transgressor is hard," was taken from the King James Version of the Bible. A dam at the headgate directed water into 6 inlets. So the picture on the top left is what it looks like today, where you can see the inlets on the side. And the picture on the lower right was shortly after the pipeline was in operation. So you can see there's a dam, there's a big rock in the middle, but there's a dam on each side, and it was enough to raise the level of the water higher than those 6 inlets you see on the left. Floating light structures directed surface debris and ice away from the openings. And you can barely see, but the suspension bridge is the only way to get to the headgate was to walk on a swinging bridge. The water flowed from the inlet to the settling basins through a 36-inch diameter steel pipe wrapped in concrete, which is shown in the top left. Since managing the intake was a full-time job for 2 people, the water company liked to hire married couples to live in the caretaker house. With its 5 rooms, it cost $1,850 to build and was considered a pretentious affair. A smaller cottage housed additional workers. It had 4 rooms and cost $450 to build. As with the pipeline, falling boulders were a problem. A retention fence that you see along the bottom of this picture helped to slow them down. And to the left of that fence, you can see the rock fall of boulders that had come down, nearly missing the cottage. Since the bridge was only built for pedestrians, the family car was parked in a garage on the other side of the river. A road from the garage connected to what is now Highway 50 and access to Canyon City. When maintenance was minimal, the caretakers would get into their car and go into town for groceries or a movie. Children were driven up the country road to catch the school bus on the highway. In the basins, nearly 4 feet of sand settled in the bottom every 3rd or 4th day and had to be shoveled out. As it got shoveled out, it made for a very nice sandy beach along the river, which is no longer there. In the fall of the year, the water department would take gunny sacks into town and fill them with leaves. They would put the leaves into the wood box on the left there at the end of the basin, where the water would carry them down and seal small leaks in the pipe. They also poured a lot of sawdust into the pipe. The spillway was a good place for a cold shower, except for when a train was passing through. During construction, the convict crew foreman lived here in a tent. He said it was one of Colorado's most desolate and lonely places for a residence. The Rivers War was the only company besides nocturnal visitors like bobcats, mountain lions, and other varmints. One night, he found a giant rattlesnake curled up beneath his mattress. Many other caretakers lived at the pipeline after he, McKinnon. The main caretaker house was, after the pipeline was shut down, got burned down by vandals. The building that you see today was the smaller house that went through several remodels. Living in the gorge, everything the caretaker needed, including a cow or piano, was transported over the bridge. The caretaker's home had no electricity, running water, or indoor bathrooms. In the 1930s, new outhouses built with WPA funds were called the Roosevelt Monuments. Water from the river was stored in a cistern and treated with chlorine before being carried up to the house in buckets. Baths were taken in a galvanized tub. The cook stove used coal. In later years, the home got electricity and a telephone. It was tough to keep someone living there year-round. From October 18 to February 12, the sun never shined on the ground, but it was the best place to fish. The next important section of the pipeline was where it crossed the river. Today, a solitary pier remains in the middle of the river. This photo shows the pier supporting the pipeline. In this photo of Royal Gorge Station, a passenger train is waiting on the side tracks for another train to pass. This location is where Santa's Village is today. After the pipeline crossed the river, it went under the tracks at Gorge Station. Then it went uphill to a 200-foot tunnel to line up with the abandoned State Canal number 1. High water pressure pushed the water uphill without any need for pumps. This photo shows the pipeline crossing over the Royal Gorge Boulevard entrance to reach the reservoir. In the background is the Hot Springs Hotel. The road was rebuilt on top of the pipeline and continued to be used by the tourists. And this is my favorite photo in the whole series. This is an example of the suspension bridges that ran between where the railroad was over to the pipeline. Take a good look at the right side, right end of that suspension bridge. I think the only way, this photo was taken by Glenn L. Gebhardt, and thanks to Larry Green, he helped me find the collection from which this photograph was in and never been published or seen anywhere else. And I really appreciate it because I think that the only way you got on that bridge was you had to sit on that rock on the right, lower your feet down the opening until they touched upon those end boards, and then kind of worked your way across. And notice the other side isn't that much easier to get out of either. This was state of the art support. Notice, this is another notice. OSHA didn't exist back in those days. By August 5th, 1909, the 30-inch pipeline was expected to be completed in just 3 more weeks. But this was August, and we all know what happens in the summer. Monsoonal rains flooded the Arkansas River on August 24th. Rock loosened by rain fell with crushing force on the pipeline. Dynamite was used to remove it. 19 places along the pipeline needed repairs, and a lot of the railroad track had been washed away. Replacement wood took time to arrive to make the repairs to the pipeline. On October 8th, 1909, the head gate opened and the water started flowing down the pipeline directly into the city mains because the settling basins in Canyon City were still under construction. The total cost of the pipeline was $291,551.22. In today's dollars, that would equal about $8.7 million. The rest of the system was completed in the summer of 1910. On June 24th, 1912, Judge Charles A. Wilkin decreed that Twin Lakes placers cease discharging mining debris into the Arkansas River. Canyon City would finally have a clean, world-class water system. One of the most significant upgrades happened in the mid-1960s. The pipeline river crossing was moved to its current position downstream. Almost a mile of wooden pipe was replaced with steel pipe. Additional changes were made to the municipal water system in town. The steel pipe bridge is still standing today, 60 years later. The steel pipe was buried under Tunnel Drive, and you can see it. This is a shot from the railroad itself. You can see the pipe under the Tunnel Drive bridge. And it looks in perfectly good shape, doesn't it, compared to a wooden pipeline? Okay. So long pipeline sections were buried in trenches to reduce the risk of boulders crushing them. However, that did not prevent the pipeline from leaking. Here, a worker is plugging a leak on a buried line. In the summer, the spray of water from a leak was refreshing. In the winter, not so much. If a leak wasn't too large, the worker took a scab or piece of metal about 5-inch wide by 6-inch long and sharpened it on one end. Then he would press it under the hoops and keep driving it until he could get it to sit over the leak. In this publicity shot of a pretty girl, you can see that her face is getting washed by a large leak in the background. Larger leaks required shutting down the pipeline as quickly as possible. Water flowing through the system was critical for not only for delivery to Canyon City, but keeping the wood wet and swollen so more leaks wouldn't occur. As you can see, despite all manners of patchwork, this section right here needed to be replaced. And this photo shows a rebuilt section of the pipeline. Maintaining the pipeline in the gorge had unique challenges. The only way to reach the head gate was by walking across a suspension bridge. This was scary in good weather and treacherous in the winter when covered with ice. To keep from slipping, workers strapped prongs under their shoes. The dam at the head gate raised the water level enough to enter the intake openings, but ice floating on the surface threatened to clog the intake with slush. And again, this is 100 years ago when temperatures were a little lower and snow, ice, and slush were much more severe than we see today. So a collection of floating slush boats diverted the ice away from the intake. During extreme sub-zero temperatures, dynamite was also used to break up the ice. If slush got into the line, the intake was turned off. A worker would dress warmly, then add a rain suit of waterproof pants and jacket. Then he would crawl into an opening in the pipe to scoop the slush into a 5-gallon bucket. The bucket had 2 ropes, one for him to pull it into the pipe and one for another worker to pull it out and dump. They would repeat the process until the pipe was clear. Once the worker in the pipe got 5 feet away from the opening, he was working in the dark. If it did not work fast enough, the still water further down the pipeline would freeze. This happened in 1932 and again in 1972. In the winter, the city waterworks reservoir held enough water to keep the faucets running. The old coreless pumps would be used as backups if the water ran out. The leaks created impressive cascades of ice. Unfortunately, the ice did not seal the leaks, which still had to be repaired. But it's better than a steel pipe. In 1949, a new auxiliary pump station for emergency use was installed below Tunnel Drive. On December 10th, 1972, the upstream pipeline intake froze despite a couple of weeks of effort to keep it clear. A dynamite blast accidentally took out a piece of the dam, dropping the water level below the intake. The pipeline froze solid for long stretches. Work crews spent several days cutting manholes in the wooden pipe and chipping away. Finally, the city administrator told them to give it up. Over 500 hours of overtime were spent trying to keep the line going. It was time to find a new solution. The cost of pumping water was now cheaper than maintaining and upgrading the 64-year-old pipeline. Also, the new Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, was questioning the hazardous work conditions along the pipeline. The Canyon City Water Department began building a new $1.5 million system with a new pumping station. It was a leak the night of November 30th, 1974, that would seal the pipeline's fate forever. Water sprayed over the Arkansas River and onto the railroad tracks and freezing. The railroad was unhappy. The intake had to be shut off because the workers couldn't get the leak to quit. Water never flowed through the pipeline again, and the new pumping station took over. The dam and footbridges were removed when the pipeline went out of business. Now rafters can travel the Arkansas River from Parkdale to Canyon City without carrying their rafts around the dam. A new $100 million industry bloomed. On June 11th, 2013, a roaring fire in the Royal Gorge raced down a ravine to the edge of the Arkansas River. In its path, it burned through 1/2 mile of the old abandoned pipeline. The unsupported hoops collapsed in a tangled mess into the river. The rafting season was underway, so guides took extra care to avoid the obstacles. After Labor Day, a work crew rafted into the gorge to fish the hoops out of the water. This was their commute. They would tie bundles of 7 to 8 hoops together and zip line them across the river into stockpiles next to the tracks. At the end of the day, the workers rafted down the river to Canyon City. They commuted in, they commuted out. They're expected to bring their own lunch because there was no place to eat out there in the gorge. When the cleanup was done, the railroad brought in a flatbed car and the team loaded the metal for recycling. So now you know, with the Arkansas River running right through the middle of Canyon City, why would anyone build a water pipeline? Thank you very much. Any? Are there any questions that I can't answer about the pipeline? Okay. Okay, so the question is if I have any photos of the or documentation about the warming huts that were burned down when the Royal Gorge fire or 2012. So no, I do not. The only warming hut I have is the one that's right on top of the head gate, the little building right on top of the head gate. But no, I do not have any of the photographs of other warming huts that were along the way. Do you have photos? But you didn't burn down the caretaker house, right? Okay. Okay, so he says he has photos from the inside, but not from the outside. And was there anything inside the warming huts?
Where you had photo of the pit and there and through what we call the narrow, which is where there was a lot of the pipe from cave.
Okay.
Showed one where it's.
Okay, so he's saying that there was a warming hut near the vent where they put the leaves into the vent. And no. Oh, the mysterious structure now that you all know about. Okay. It, it was a pressure release system, yes, and it was particularly eventful. It was very important there to have that complex system there because of the going up the hill and down the hill again. And they wanted, if water was to get released, they wanted it running down the tunnel and not down on the tracks further down. So they wanted it specifically over the tunnel section of it. Yes, question in the back. Okay, so the photo of the vent. So let's make sure. See, now you're seeing it backwards and forwards and upside down and right. Okay, there's the vent. Okay, so here's. Okay.
Downstream that tributary.
Okay, so the warming station was right where the blue arrow is showing the pipeline water flow. Yeah. Yeah, because by then probably what you saw is that the pipeline was then running on the original lower level. This is you when you are down on the tracks, you cannot see that upper pipeline. And that the only reason that I was able to get this photo is thanks to Ty Cipher building the Royal Gorge Ranch Resort in place of where Buckskin Joe was, that you could get back out on Point Alta Vista thanks to him. And this is a shot taken from Point Alta Vista. So otherwise, anyone who was even working on the pipeline wasn't aware that that upper route was there because they couldn't see it from the water level. So no, so any other questions? Yes, yes, you're talking it. So the question is, wasn't there a hot springs hotel? And yes, it's the it's the pink house. So where you see in this picture here, the Hot Springs Hotel, there was a hot springs. It was in a separate building. I believe that the actual springs where you go and bathe, and people would come into town and they'd ride the railroad in and they'd go to the hotel to bathe and stay. It's now privately owned, and there's a house that's pink. And it's called the Pink House, and it's actually where the rafters who've been going through the gorge come out of the river and get back on the bus. And so it's still there, but it's all privately owned. But it had its own fame, and owners tried very hard to keep the Hot Springs Hotel running, and it finally closed down. Yeah, it's not as strong. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just remarkable that this angle showing the pipeline, which it's hard to see here, but as the pipeline went downhill, the bands around the pipeline got closer and closer together because the pressure was building up more and more in the pipeline. See, so for every 66, for every 60 feet, for every 60 feet of fall, you have 100 of of elevation change, you have 100 pounds of pressure. So that means they had a lot of bands. Those two guys sitting on there is a better example. Oh, where is it? There it is. So you can see on this picture here how close those bands were. Because this is at this right across behind them, just behind this hill was where the settling and this, yeah, this is actually where it exits Tunnel Drive, where these guys are sitting in this other photo. Oops. They're sitting a little on the upper right-hand corner over that tower that you see supporting the right-hand end of the pipeline. That's where they're sitting. And you're looking to the left at this hill on the left. And then just on the other side of the hill, then it would drop down into the settling basins to remove silt. It's still at that level. So the water. Okay, so the water treatment was actually at that same level. It was not down at the track level, at the pipe level, which is much higher than the track itself. But it's quite a, do you have hydrology? Okay. Okay. So.
Cell utilizes wooden water mains, gravity flow from reservoir number 3.
CFI? Well, Rocky Mountain Steel. CFI, yeah. Here in Pueblo. Still using a 4-foot and a 5-foot water main. Wood, oh, wooden encased. Okay, wood on the inside. From reservoir number 3. Okay, so that's the first time I've heard someone say that the wood stave in some form is still in use. And it's gravity flow. But that mill water is the pipeline is encased in concrete. So you have to keep it, yeah. Okay, way back to the 40s and 50s. Wow. Hmm. Oh, you know all about patching leaks on the. Okay, it's used for cooling. It's just cooling mill water. Okay. Oh, that's cool. I learned. See, I just learned something here that there's still. Oh, the next lecture, yes. Well, it's hard enough trying to keep myself involved with the Royal Gorge because there's a whole lot of history for the Royal Gorge itself, and I have to decide where I divide. Yeah. Yeah, and as was Denver and Springs. Okay. Any other questions, or is there a question on the chat? Any? No chatting. I put them to sleep, huh? Okay, thank you very much.